Alright guys, so I got my 7.3 Godzilla here, and I just got back from a camping trip. I had the camper hooked up, I had some stuff in the bed as you can see. Got my auxiliary fuel tank. So we were loaded up about 5,500 pounds. That's a pretty typical tow for me. I'll tow as much as 10, 12,000 with this here and there. Not super often though, it's usually just that 5,500. So what I want to talk about is kind of my philosophy and what I do to manage, just driving characteristics while towing. So I'm going to actually start this thing up. And what we're going to do is burn some gas, unfortunately, but I need to do this so I can put it in gear and show you what I want to show you here. So we're going to put it in drive. All right. It's going to be screaming at me. All right. We're going to pop that off. Cool. So now you can see all 10 gears, and I'm sitting on my torque converter for you guys, so you should be thankful. And the way these transmissions work is you can lock out the higher gears, right? So for example, if I hit this minus button, I can go and lock out 10th gear, 9th gear, 8th gear. You could technically lock out all the way to first. Obviously that's not really realistic, but let's just say you're towing something, like 5,500 pound camper that I have, and you say to yourself, I don't want overdrives, so I'm gonna lock out all the way to 7th, right? So that's your 1-to-1 gear. So it will never shift past 7th gear, okay? Now, what I personally do is I actually never really lock out gears unless I'm in tons of mountains where it's just never going to need 10th and it's trying to gear hunt a bit. So I'll always go into tow haul. And what tow haul does, first of all, is it does extend your shift points a little bit. It also does not allow it to skip shift. Certain year super duties, like mine, will go 1st, 3rd, 5th, and then 6 through 10 individually. So it stops that from happening, which is good. And it just kind of overall is a little bit better for towing. So I typically do tow haul mode, especially if I'm in anywhere like in the city or state routes, because I find that it's much better than just relying on the skip shift and kind of the more fuel economy oriented tuning that the regular modes have, whether it's normal mode, whether it's eco mode, that kind of thing. So we'll be in tow mode. And what I'll do is I actually typically do use my cruise control, believe it or not. So I'll set my cruise control to 72 miles an hour. That's where I like to be. You can argue in the comments where you like to tow. That's fine. I find with my camper that I need to be at about anywhere from, if I'm pulling any amount of grade, I need to be 2,200 RPM to about 3,200 RPM. And it'll pretty much tow any hill in that range, so long as I'm not trying to pass a car or whatever. What that equates to gear-wise is that puts me in about 6th as a 3,200 RPM at 72 miles an hour kind of passing gear, we'll call it, or pulling gear I should say, up a hill. And then 7th and 8th are kind of the cruising gears for anything flat or ever so slight of a hill. And then once in a while I'll bump into 9 or 10th. And what I'll basically do is I'm driving, okay? So I've just imagined, you're gonna have to imagine here, I got my cruise control set, okay? And I'm going 72 miles an hour. I see a grade coming. Okay, so when I see a grade coming, I'm going to put it in manual mode, and I'm going to select manual. That's not what we want. I'm going to select manual, 7th gear. Sorry, it started shifting there. I don't want to shift it all the way up to the 7th while I'm parked. But I'll do manual 7th, and then that'll keep it from the cruise control overcompensating and shifting into 5th. Because what will happen is the cruise control, if you're already in like 8th or 9th, it'll always drop 2 gears. So it'll say 9 to 7, for example. And then instead of going 7 to 6, when it never needs less than 6, it'll just go to 5 because it doesn't want to keep shifting, which I understand. But I'm a little bit smarter than its programming, because I've just driven the truck so much now. And I know that I can just shift straight to 6th gear and I'll always be able to hold what I want. So I'm basically, as I go throughout my driving, the second I hit a grade, if I just don't want it to go into 5th, I'll, manual mode, I'll just bump it into 6th, hold my hill, bump it into 7th. Maybe I'll lose a little bit of speed to 65, then I'll bump it back into 6th, let it climb to 72, bump it back. And that's if I want to. Otherwise, just leave it in 6th and let it ride. This is if I'm trying to kind of hypermile and maximize fuel economy. I find that if I kind of play with the gears a little bit, I can get into the mid 8s. If I don't, then I'm at the low 8s. Which kind of is what it is. It's a gas 7.3 liter engine. You just got to accept the fact that, it's not going to get the best mileage towing. But I find that to be very comfortable. Trans temps on these are always going to be anywhere from, this has been sitting for a while, but they're going to be anywhere from basically 214 to 220 for 225-ish. And that's not anything with the way you're driving. It has nothing to do with anything else other than the fact that these trucks are thermostatically controlled, and the way the computer cycle is, it just kind of bounces. It lets it get hot, it cools it down. It lets it get hot, it cools it down. And it's just going to do that no matter what. You can drive yourself crazy trying to lower your trans temp, and you never will. Trust me, I've towed probably 10,000 miles with this thing already, and it's just how it works. Obviously, if you're towing 20,000 pounds on a 110-degree day in Death Valley or whatever, you could probably get it to spike and overheat. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about somebody who's towing, on a normal 80 or 90-degree day in the north or southeast or something like that. So the other thing is, a lot of guys will, get nervous about towing in overdrive gear. So in this case, 8, 9, 10. I don't personally care. I understand that your transmission's stronger 1-to-1. However, I'm literally towing a third of the rated tow capacity of this truck. And if I had a different rear end ratio, I have 355s. If I had like 430s, it'd actually be less than a third of the rated capacity. So that's just not enough weight, in my opinion, to be concerned about towing an overdrive. If I was towing, 15,000 pounds, I probably would lock it right out to 7th and just take the fuel economy penalty or whatever. But anyway, not a super long video, but I just kind of want to talk about that. That is my philosophy on how I like to tow with this, and that is a good blend of, you can just kind of sit back and cruise and not have to babysit your truck, if that makes sense, while also kind of taking care of it, but not just sitting there the whole time moving buttons. And it depends, right? If I'm mid-conversation or I'm on the phone or something, hands-free, of course, whatever, and I'm talking and I don't want to have to pay attention to it, then sometimes I'll kick the cruise control off and then I'll just use my foot and I'll just kind of pedal it to keep it in 6th or 7th to make sure it doesn't downshift. I'll lose a little bit of speed up the hills and do that sort of thing. One thing I wish they did, and no truck does this, but I wish it was a little feature that I want to see. So Ford, if you're listening, I would love to see if they had a little scroll wheel here or something that said maximum downshift RPM. And I know what you're thinking, what the heck, what is that going to do for me? Well, what that's going to do is that would say, okay, if you set this to, call it 4,000 RPM, all right? If I'm in, say, let's just start this back up. If I'm in, whoa, sorry guys. If I'm in 7th gear, okay, and it wants to pull a super steep hill with a heavy trailer, it needs 4th gear. Well, that would be, say, 5,000 RPM. So instead of allowing that, it would only ever let it downshift to 4,000 RPM, so then it would say grab 5th gear. And if I did 3,000 RPM, it'd grab like 6th gear from 8th gear or whatever it is, right? And then what would be cool about that is you could leave your cruise control on, which towing and cruise control is super nice, unless it just revs the crap out of your engine and you don't want it to. So this would allow you to kind of have the best of both worlds, right? Cruise control on and still not have the thing tack it out to the moon, even with a heavier trailer. And then you just sacrifice some mile per hour. So be it. If I'm going 72 and there's no traffic, I don't necessarily care if I drop to 60, but I'm not screaming the engine, right? So that would be more advantageous for me. That would be an awesome feature. I would love if somebody added that. I would probably buy my next truck based on that feature if somebody had it, because I think that would make the towing experience just so nice for somebody who's not in a super big hurry, also wants to minimize shifting a little bit, and still, but still wants to get there sometime today. Anyways, that's kind of all I got to say on that. So as always, guys, thanks for watching. God bless America, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.